A canvas that looks like someone forgot to paint it sells for $40 million. Somewhere in the room, a man in a gray suit raises a paddle. He doesn't blink. He doesn't smile. He just raises it again. If you've ever watched clips of an art auction, this is the moment that breaks people's brains. Not the price, the calm. Because everything in you says that number should come with panic, or at least some hesitation, right? Instead, you get a man checking his watch. So today we're not asking, why is art expensive? That's the boring question, and honestly, it's the wrong one. We're asking, what does that man in the gray suit actually see in that room that you don't? Because here's the thing I want you to sit with for the next 15 minutes. The story you've been told about why the rich buy art is mostly a decoy. The real answer is stranger, more mechanical, and honestly, more useful to you than you'd think, because the machinery that gets him to raise that paddle a second time is the exact same machinery that gets you to buy the shoes you didn't need or refresh the checkout page during a flash sale. Same wiring, different zeros. Let's get into it. Ask the average person why billionaires buy art and you get one of three answers. They just love beautiful things, or they're showing off, or it's a tax thing, they're hiding money. And look, all three are true, sometimes. But they're also the answers a journalist gets when they ask a collector's PR person, not what's actually happening in the room when the hammer's about to drop. Here's what nobody puts in the press release. The room itself is doing something to the bidder's body before the object does anything to their taste. There's a body of research on this, and it has a name: auction fever. Researchers define it as an emotional state that causes bidders to deviate from the strategy they walked in with, often resulting in serious overbidding past whatever number they'd privately set as their ceiling. And the triggers for it are almost insultingly simple: rivalry, time pressure, and an audience. Put a human being in a room with those three ingredients, and their heart rate goes up, their palms get damp, and their decision-making, this is the part that should unsettle you, starts running on a completely different system than the one they used to set their budget an hour earlier. One study even found that bidders get more aggressive specifically when they're competing against another person in the room rather than an anonymous computer bid. It's not really about the object at that point. It's about not losing to a human being who is watching you. So before we talk about taste or legacy or investment strategy, understand this. The paddle goes up a second time partly because of a nervous system response that has nothing to do with the painting. Okay, let's slow it down and look at three separate mechanisms stacked on top of each other, because it's never just one thing putting that paddle up. Mechanism 1, the fever. We just covered this, but here's the detail that makes it click. Researchers have shown that incidental arousal from something totally unrelated to the auction, like a stressful phone call 20 minutes earlier, still increases how much people bid. Your body doesn't always know the difference between I'm excited because I might lose this bid and I'm excited because of literally anything else that happened today. It just registers arousal, and arousal pushes that number up. The guy who had a test negotiation on the way to the auction house might unconsciously pay more for the same painting than he would on a calm day. The room isn't just testing his taste, it's testing his state. Mechanism 2, the moment it starts feeling like yours. Here's the one that explains why people blow past their own limits. Psychologists call it the pseudo-endowment effect. The longer you hold that paddle up, the more your brain starts treating the object as already yours, even though you haven't paid a cent. And once something feels like yours, walking away from it doesn't feel like not buying it. It feels like losing something you already had. That's a completely different emotional calculation. I chose not to spend $40 million feels rash. I let it slip through my fingers feels like a wound. Auction houses aren't naive about this. The slow, rising theatrical pace of the bidding isn't inefficiency. It's the exact amount of time required for that psychological ownership to set in. Mechanism 3, the room is the point. And this is the layer almost nobody talks about. The audience is not incidental to the auction, it is a feature. Bidding against a stranger you'll never see again, in private, produces a completely different result than bidding in a packed room where people will see you again at the next gala or watching you decide how much you value something. And by extension, how much you value winning. At a certain price point, the object being sold and the status of being the person who won it become almost impossible to separate. Okay, so far this all sounds like billionaires are just as irrational as the rest of us, just with more zeros. And partly, that's true. There's a second layer here, a genuinely insider layer that most explainer content skips because it requires actually understanding how wealth is structured. This is the part where we shift from psychology to mechanics. First, illiquidity is a feature, not a flaw. To someone with a normal amount of money, the fact that a painting is hard to sell quickly sounds like a downside. To someone managing a fortune, that's exactly the point. Fine art doesn't move in sync with the stock market. It's part of the portfolio because it behaves differently. A long-term store of value that doesn't wake up and crash when the Nasdaq does. Second, the price is deliberately unclear, and that's useful. Unlike a share of stock, there's no regulator standing behind a painting's price tag. Nobody can definitively tell you what it's actually worth. That ambiguity, which looks like a flaw to an outsider, is precisely what allows very large sums of money to move through the art market with a level of discretion no other asset class offers. Third, the donation leap. Here's a scenario that plays out more often than you think. A collector buys a piece for $50 million. It sits in a storage, appreciates, gets appraised at $80 million. Instead of selling it, which would trigger a taxable gain, they donate it to a museum. They get a deduction on the full $80 million appraised value. They reduce their tax bill significantly, and they walk away publicly framed as a great person of the arts. It's completely legal. It's also quietly one of the most efficient tax tools available to extremely wealthy people. Fourth, and this is the one nobody puts in the headline, access is the actual product. Just 2 auction houses control the majority of the serious global art trade. Being a real player in that world isn't about loving Basquiat. It's about being on a very short list of people those 2 houses call before something goes to a public auction. The painting is almost incidental. What you're really buying over years is a relationship with the handful of people who decide who get first look at the next masterpiece, in the next estate sale, the next quiet, off-market deal. That access compounds in ways a shoe collection never will. So when the man in the gray suit raises the paddle without blinking, some of that calm is arousal management. Some of it is confidence built on knowing exactly what tax structure this purchase slots into before he even bid. He's not just buying a painting. He's buying a position inside a system most people never see the architecture of. Okay, so here's where I want to bring this back down to you, because if this video ends at "rich people are strange," I've wasted your time. The mechanisms we just walked through, arousal, pseudo-ownership, scarcity, and audience watching you decide, none of that is exclusive to billionaires. It's just been dialed up to its most extreme, expensive version in that auction room. The exact same architecture is running underneath. The only tool left is stock banner that makes you check out faster than you meant to. The countdown timer on a flash sale. The bidding war on a house you weren't even sure you wanted until someone else offered it on it too. Competitive arousal. To explain why scarcity and time pressure push ordinary people toward impulsive purchases. Same nervous system, different currency. So here's a shift in perspective I actually want to leave you with. The wealthy aren't operating on a different psychology than you. They're operating on the same psychology. Inside a system they've had the resources to reverse engineer. They know the fever is happening to them, and some of them have learned to let it happen strategically. Because you've already priced in the tax benefit, the diversification benefit, the access benefit before the bidding even starts. For everyone else in that room without that structure underneath them, the fever is just a way to lose money in public. If you ever find yourself curious about the world, not to gawk at it, but because you're thinking about wealth building seriously, the real takeaway isn't learn to love fine art. It's this: the asset is rarely the asset. The illiquidity, the ambiguity, the relationships with the 2 or 3 gatekeepers who control access, that's the actual portfolio. Painting on the wall is just the receipt. And the next time you feel your own pulse pick up over a limited time only banner on your phone, it's not a coincidence. That's the same paddle, held by someone with a lot less room to lose. Alright folks, that's the deep dive. If this shifted how you look at the world, let me know down below. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.